Hey everybody, I'm Benjamin, aka The Terrible Australian of Supermastery.com, and welcome to my video review of Maze Runner, The Scorch Trials, which of course is the second installment of the Maze Runner series. So let's get right into it. Now, I haven't read any of the Maze Runner books, so I don't know how these films sort of compare to them. So I'm basically just judging them solely as films. But I can say though, having seen the original film last year, The Maze Runner, I actually really enjoyed that one. It was a kind of a surprisingly well made and pretty entertaining sort of teen sci-fi action film. And I thought it was pretty well done. Like, it didn't really add anything new in terms of plot or anything like that, but I think what it did it pretty well. So when it came to the sequel, which is subtitled The Scorch Trials, I was very interested to check it out to see where the story was going to go. Because honestly, I kind of found the very ending of the first film slightly confusing, and that was kind of like one of my big criticisms of the film, was because the ending was a bit muddled. So this one, we kind of follow the film. This new one, The Scorch Trials, kind of takes place pretty much not long after the events of the first film. So we just follow our characters as they've left the maze and sort of what happens to them on their journey, and then they're trying to find out what's going on and what's happening to them. And of course, once they do, there's a lot more going on than they thought it is. And I have to say, I think just like the first film, I did really enjoy this one as well. I think it's a pretty solid film I would say is just as equally as good as the first. I don't know if it's better, but I would say it's on the same length as the first one, even though it sort of tackles a completely kind of different story. And also, again, it sort of doesn't really sort of add anything new to the plot that we haven't seen before in other films. But like I said, like the first one, the filmmaking and the performance is sort of elevated to be better than it could have been, and I just think it's pretty well made regardless. So director Wes Ball, who directed the first film, actually does a really good job here with his direction of the film. The film looks great, and I think I was reading up that the budget of the film was up for this sequel. Was only $61 million US, and you would think watching this film that it looks much bigger and it must cost a lot more, but the fact that this movie looks as great as it does on a $60 million budget is kind of astonishing for me. So in a way, just based on this film and the last one, Wes Ball has definitely got a pretty good eye when it comes to sort of creating a world and establishing like pretty solid and intense action set pieces, and he's able to do all this and also to make something that feels like very small scale in terms of story look and feel much bigger than it is. And this one is definitely a much bigger film than the first in terms of scope and story, and he does a pretty good job at that direction wise, and the script's also pretty well written as well. So I mean, for this type of film anyway. And of course, all the cast from the original, from the surviving sort of cast members from the first film, like Dylan O'Brien, Kayla Scodelario. I probably butchered her last name, so forgive me, and Thomas Brodie-Sangster. Butchered his name too, so forgive me for that as well. And a few and the sort of other supporting cast from the first film are back, and once again they all do pretty solid work with their roles. And also sort of the new added cast, and they've got some pretty big names for this one. You've got Giancarlo Giannini, Lili Taylor, Barry Pepper, Alan Tudyk, and of course, Aidan, Gillen, and also Patricia Clarkson. I've sort of basically kind of a cameo in the first film, is back with a much larger role in this one as well. So they've probably got a pretty strong sort of A-list of who's who of well-known actors in the supporting cast. And I have to say though, everyone does a pretty solid job with their performances. But that being said, it's not like they have anything demanding to do with their roles, but you can tell that everyone's having, still putting in the good work anyway, regardless of what type of film it is, and they all still give solid performances regardless. And also, visual effects are pretty good, action set pieces are pretty well done, and also in some ways it's kind of a bit of a horror movie as well, because there's some creatures in the film called cranks that are kind of like these zombified creatures, and in a way this is kind of a zombie film as well in some regard, And I thought that those scenes were actually pretty well handled as well and quite intense. So, yeah, I actually overall really enjoyed the Scorch Trials. I will say though, like in terms of sort of negatives, I will admit it kind of took me a little bit long to get into the story of this one, mainly because even though I saw the original film last year, there were just certain aspects of the plot of the first film that I forgot about, and so when sort of some things that were brought up in the first film were brought up here again, I sort of was a bit confused at first about like what's going on, and then I realized had something to do with what happened in the first film. So this is definitely one that you have to see back to back with the previous film, because if you sort of see this one on its own, you're not going to understand what's going on. It's definitely a sequel, not really sort of like a standalone type sequel or anything like that. So, and as well as, you know, like I said, even though it's a pretty well made film, like I said, it doesn't really sort of bring anything new in regards to the plot. So you kind of get all the sort of, so it kind of feels like a bit of a mishmash of different type of ideas and concepts that we've seen before. Like I said, there's a bit of a zombie element in there, and post-apocalyptic and dystopian kind of elements, and, you know, a virus sort of wiping out most of humanity. You like all that, and also a bit of a resistance fighting back against the bad guys. You know, it's sort of all this stuff you've seen many times before. So in that regard, the film is kind of stuffed with that. But at the same time, like I said, it still does it pretty well, and you're still pretty engaged by what's going on. And also there's some interesting things that they do with some of the characters in the film that I found pretty interesting, particularly with Kayla, I'm going to get her name right, so Kayla Scodelario, again if I butchered her name, so forgive me. Like, they do a really interesting element with her character in this film that I found pretty interesting, and actually and I didn't expect that with this film would go with her character. And also one thing I really like about these Maze Runner films is that, unlike sort of other, you know, young adult sort of sci-fi or dystopian type films that are out there, this series doesn't rely on a love story or a love triangle to sort of keep things going. I mean, there's no time for a love story in these films, and I got to give the filmmakers credit for not trying to shoehorn something like that in there, and that sort of just makes it, because that type of stuff is kind of tiring, and I like the fact that this series so far hasn't done that. So yeah, like overall, it doesn't sort of bring anything new to the table, sort of plot-wise, but overall, I thought Maze Runner: The Scorch Trials was still a pretty solid and pretty entertaining film, and it ends on a cliffhanger. So, but it's a cliffhanger that has me very interested to check out the third film, which will be out, I think, in a few years' time. So yeah, if I had to give this film a rating, I'd give it about 3.5. So yep, that's the end of my video review of Maze Runner: The Scorch Trials. I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and I'll see you all later. See everyone. Bye.